Aileen Carol Wuornos, the dreadful female serial killer who became a monster due to her horrid crimes. Ever heard the term monster? I know many of us to have a bad image in mind when the term monster appears before us. In fact, our mothers used to frighten us back in our childhood using the term, but do you even know how a monster is made? What are the circumstances in which someone turns into a despicable monster? Obviously, it can be the physical appearance, but when it comes to humans turning into monsters, there is always a deeper issue at the bottom. Some experiences might have turned wrong, and that ends up with a person turning into a monster. Well, in today's case, we will investigate one such pattern of transformation where apparently an innocent-looking girl ended up being a monster in the late 80s. Welcome to AF Crime, the channel that brings you fascinating crimes all around the world. If you're interested in this kind of content, then this channel is for you. Make sure to like this video, click on the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to keep you updated on our recent uploads. Now, let's get right into the video and investigate more about this case, where the girl didn't choose to become a monster, but her circumstances were planning something else for her. It was a fall night in November in Florida. A girl who seemed to be in her mid-20s was attempting to show her interest in the nighttime show running before her on the TV. Apparently, she pretended to watch the show, but her interest was diverted somewhere else. Her gaze was repeatedly falling on the floor. It seemed that she was waiting for someone else. As the clock struck 11, she heard a noise on the door. Someone was unlocking that. She immediately knew who it could be. A woman in her mid-20s had entered the place. She seemed tired and disturbed. She looked at the girl sitting on the couch and told her, "I killed Richard because he was trying to rape me." She had said those words calmly, but the color of her face was changing abruptly. The woman on the couch looked at her in disbelief because she had warned her already about the consequences of her actions, and now she was here facing them. But one thing was unknown to both. This was just the start of her trial, and things were going to change for both. The woman who killed Richard was Aileen Carol Wuornos, and the woman who had warned her already was her girlfriend, Tyria Moore. Aileen was working as a prostitute since the age of 15. Because of her troubled past, she was born into a family of alcoholics where her mother, Diane Wuornos, left her at the mercy of her grandparents. When Aileen became 11, she was sexually assaulted by her grandfather and beaten severely quite a few times. By the age of 14, the assaults turned into a routine norm, and she was unable to stop any of that. One day, her grandfather raped her along with a friend, and that night she was severely hurt internally. Now, it sounds horrific, but it was the torture that Aileen had to bear. She knew that her grandfather would get extremely pissed if she resisted a bit. This was the first time when she had felt disappointed. This incident not only impacted her state of mind, but also influenced her academic performance. She was unable to focus in class, and that's when she received the second blow. One day after school, she was lured by a guy who later gang raped her along with her friends. At this point, she received another piece of news when she was being gang raped. She was 5 weeks pregnant by that time. It was later revealed that the child was her grandfather's friend, though some people claimed that the father of the child was her own grandfather. Aileen hid that for a long time. She knew that her reputation was already tainted, and a series of assaults had weakened her mind to an extent that she was unable to sleep at night. Mostly, she remained awake throughout, and her mental health was deteriorating at a fast pace. Later on, she gave birth to her son at a local center for unwed mothers. She didn't feel a bit of motherly affection toward the baby, but he was a reminder of the terrible incident which had destroyed her mental well-being. So, she left the child over there for adoption and continued with her own life. All this had already degraded her mental health and reputation to an extent that she could no longer focus in school anymore. Hence, she dropped out of school in the fall of 1971. Her grandmother also died a few weeks later. Her grandfather kicked her out of the house because he thought she was an additional burden. She was 15 at that time. It would have been much harder for the teenage Aileen to survive on her own than one can imagine. She had no idea what to make out of life anymore because she had seen its darkest sides at such a tender age. So she eventually came to terms with what life was offering her. She adopted the profession of an escort permanently for the rest of her life because she knew that she couldn't get any other job than that. Therefore, she started prostitution for the sake of a few favors, some bucks, and a roof over her head. Soon, she realized that what she was making out of prostitution was not enough to make ends meet, and she needed more than that. This time, she chose a different path. She started getting into theft and drugs to make more money. By early 1974, she found that she couldn't sustain a better life in Michigan, so she decided to leave the place hoping for a better future. But a web of crime was waiting for her ahead. When she left, she took a .22 caliber pistol alongside her to protect herself in case of an assault. She was already consuming drugs by that time, and her first arrest occurred as a result of that. She was arrested for driving high, and not only that, but she had also fired from the pistol in her state of unconsciousness. This resulted in the suspension of her driver's license. Later on, she hitchhiked to Florida with the hope of a better future, and she had almost achieved that by starting a new family with a yacht club president, Louis Gratz Fell. Fell was 69 at that time, and she was still a teenager, but she described to the papers at that time it was a marriage powered by love. Soon, the love faded in weeks, and she started hurting on multiple occasions. He became so miserable at one point that he thought about the divorce. Part of that resulted from the hatred Aileen felt when Fell tried to touch her, and this wedding ended in a flow of weeks. By now, Aileen was extremely displeased with everything in life. Things had all become so dark for Aileen that she started thinking about ending her life. It was 1978 when she tried to attempt suicide by firing the pistol in her stomach, but was saved. Later on, she revealed that she had attempted suicide 22 times because she believed that the will to live had escaped from her. She had no idea what she was doing anymore with her life. However, what little happiness life has to offer to her was in the form of Tyria Moore, whom she met in 1986 at a gay bar. Tyria Moore was a hotel maid who had recently left her family to live on her own because she came out a few months ago. By that time, Aileen realized that she was a lesbian, and this new identity started reviving the broken fragments of her life. She moved together with Tyria, and together they started supporting each other financially and in all other affairs of life. By that time, she had deeply fallen in love with 24-year-old Tyria. She told her everything about her troubled and traumatic past. She also disclosed to her what she did for a living. Tyria accepted her, but also discouraged her from getting into prostitution. In Tyria's opinion, Aileen could do something else to sustain life because she felt that prostitution was mentally draining Aileen day by day. It was in 1989 when Aileen told Tyria that she had murdered one of her clients, Richard Charles Mallory, because he was trying to rape her and she could not bear that trauma anymore. Tyria understood her point of view, but also warned her that she can stop doing that now because eventually it would lead to a bigger problem than one would think. Aileen also knew that this can't go on for a long run and that eventually she will be prosecuted by the police, but this belief rather started motivating her to kill other clients who tried to rape her. A few months later, she killed 40-year-old rodeo worker Charles Edmund Carskadden, whom she claimed was attempting to rape her. In a period of 1 month, she had found 2 other prey. This time, it was 47-year-old construction worker David Andrew Spears and a 65-year-old Peter Abraham Sims. Both of them were murdered with the same .22 caliber pistol, and innumerable bullet holes were found in their body. By July of 1990, the count had turned 5 when she killed Troy Eugene Burris, a 50-year-old sausage salesman. In September, she killed Charles Richard Dick Humphreys, who was later found to be a reported child abuser in the past and was now 56 years old. As the fall of November 1990 arrived, Aileen had killed a 7th person named Walter Gino Antonio, a 62-year-old security guard whose body was later found at a remote log. This investigation tracked that the pattern of the killings was quite similar to each other, and that all the bodies were stripped off, which indicated that the murderer used to steal their belongings, and it was this fact that later put Aileen in trouble. The police were in search of Aileen from the time they recovered Peter Sem's dead body, because a witness named Rhonda Bailey had given them the description of two women. Furthermore, they found Aileen's fingerprints on some of the receipts of sales of belongings of the victims, which they had recovered from the pawn shops. The shopkeepers further gave them the description of the woman who had come to sell the belongings. They used Aileen's fingerprints to track her identity. Well, as she was arrested multiple times in the past, so she had a criminal record in the database which could make it simple for the police to track her. She was arrested on January 9th, 1991 at a resort bar. Initially, she didn't confess to any single crime because she knew that if she confessed, then the consequences were going to become very dire for her. This is when police used Tyria Moore to get her confession. Tyria stated that she informed Aileen that if she wasn't going to confess to the crimes, then they would be arresting Tyria, considering her the one responsible. Tyria knew that Aileen loved her and she had no link with any of those killings, except that she was an ally of Aileen and didn't go to the police after the first murder. Aileen instantly confessed after that because she told Tyria that she couldn't bear Tyria to suffer from the consequences of her actions. She later on confessed to the police that she wanted to become guardian angel for Tyria because she was the only one whom she loved more than the world itself. In February 1992, the jury convicted her of 3 murders and a death sentence was announced for her crimes. Tyria got the confession immunity. In May 1992, the investigations on the remaining 3 murder cases included Troy Eugene and Richard Humphreys, concluded that Aileen had already confessed to their murder. She was once again sentenced to death at that time with the right to appeal against the decision. She deliberately kept on rejecting all the others for appeals. One of the reporters who got the chance to talk to her during imprisonment said that it seemed that she was tired of running away and she finally chose to die in the end in peace. During her imprisonment, she underwent testing for psychopathy. She scored 32 out of 40, where the psychiatrist revealed that she was a victim of borderline personality disorder and that her past experiences had turned her into an absolute psychopath who was not angry about one but many things in her life. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9th, 2002. Her last words caught special attention all over the internet as she said, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, Big Mothership and all, I'll be back." This gave way to the belief that she was here, indicating her relevance with a satanic cult, and she intended to be back through reincarnation. In fact, people tried to decode the true connotation of these words. But if the words of the prison psychiatrist are to be believed, then those words simply refer to her idea of sacrifice and freedom. One expert later revealed that she might have said those words because she had seen horrific events throughout her life. The will to live was totally dead in her by the time she was executed. Yet, one person was there whom she cared about even in her last moments, and that one person was her girlfriend, Tyria Moore. So, she was assuring herself that once she got free from this life where she had to sacrifice a lot, she would come back again just to see the happy version of herself. Well, those words might seem strange, but one couldn't reject the fact that Aileen was the first and perhaps the only serial killer whose way of killing induces goosebumps, and she even said once that she had no regrets about killing those men considering the past they had. Based on Aileen's experiences, in 2003 a film named Monster was released, which made Charlize Theron America's Most Beloved Star, and she earned an Academy Award too, due to her performance in that movie. Aileen might be a monster for many, yet this monster was not made in a day. Her circumstances gradually transformed her into the bad person she became by the end of her life. She once told a reporter that she only had seen the evil and worst side of people throughout her life, and this gave way to her own evil rising among all other evil souls who were doing worse than her own self. What do you think? Was she a monster or was she made one? Do tell me in the comments. Plus, if you feel that this case was an intriguing one, like this video and share it with all your friends. Also, subscribe to our channel, AF Crime, for finding out more shocking crime tales around the world. And if you have any criminal case that you would like me to investigate, share it in the comment section below.